let's get into our game review. What do you say?
I'm so ready.
Today, we are reviewing Hansa Teutonica Big Box, which came out in 2020, but the original Hansa Teutonica came out 11 years ago in 2009. The designer of this game is Andreas Stedding, who also has some other pretty big, exciting hits under his name, such as Gugong and Firenze, and those are
For
sort
Dynasty.
of his. Yep, that's true. Stu for Dynasty. But yeah, definitely Hansa I think would be his sort of his big hit, and a beloved Euro by many. The artist is Dennis Lohausen, maybe the most iconic artist in all of board games to me. You've seen his art on every UVA game, on Terra Mystica, on Voyages of Marco Polo, Gaia Project. I mean, he is the Simone Luciane of board game artists. Hansa Teutonica plays 3 to 5 players. Oh, sorry, the publisher is Pegasus Spiel. Plays 3 to 5 players. That is different than you'll find in the original box of the game, which says 2 to 5 players. They have removed the 2-player variant, as I believe the designer did not feel it was strong enough to put on the box. You can still play the variant. It's just not included in the box. All the components you need to play it are there, though.
It's just not good.
It's just not good enough to. I really appreciate that they do this. They don't want to trick people into buying this. If you put 2 to 5 on it, people will go, "Oh, great! A game I can play with my partner," and then people get it and realize, like, "Oh, it's kind of a not great version of the game." Mm-hmm. So I think, if you really want to find a way to play it with 2, you can. The designer is just letting you know that's not what it was made for. 3 to 5 players. 45 to 90 minutes, which is dead on. I mean, this is not a long game. There's a lot of game here that you can play in 90 minutes, and that's even potentially with 5 people. The weight is 3.50, which feels really high to me. I would put this at 3. But maybe it's 3.50 with all the expansions and everything. I'll just give you a brief description of what it says here. The multi-award-winning strategy game Hansa Teutonica is back in a big box edition, including the base game and all expansions. In the game, players attempt to increase their standing as merchants in the Hanseatic League by gaining prestige points in various ways. Hansa Teutonica is a highly interactive strategy game as players block and push each other each turn, but it also gives cunning players the chance to put being blocked into the advantage. The game's many possible strategies can also be tested and perfected on the variant game boards of this beloved Britannia and East expansions. Before we get into the game itself, the difference between the big box and the basic game of Hansa Teutonica is not a lot. This is just the exact game with the exact components you find in the core box with 2 expansion maps. That's it, just maps. A deck of cards that can be used as a module, and 2 other small modules that were released as promos. So this is not 9 expansions and 15 promos. This is just a little bit more than you would have gotten in the core box. But the nice thing is that it was very hard to get all these things before, and so if you're a completionist, this is everything. But this is not a throw away your old copy, get a new one. It's literally the same art, same game, same components. Nothing's changed. Just the few small expansions that existed are now in one box. And it's not a big box, which is funny. It's actually a modestly sized box.
That just didn't. It's not as much of a marketing ploy to say the Hansa Teutonica reasonably sized box edition.
I think it's actually a smaller box than the base game came in. But Ben, tell us all about Hansa
Teutonica. Well, first of all, I just want to say that this game for the longest time was actually extremely available. It was always on Amazon for $30, and it was always there. The maps, everything was just there for the longest time.
Not when I was looking.
When did you start looking for it?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think around 2018 is when it finally just kind of like petered out. But for the longest time, it just was there, and it was this game that was always there. And then I think once it like kind of disappeared, I think interest in it started to kind of rise, of course. So I think that's what's kind of funny about it. But Hansa Teutonica is this game where you have this big old map, and the map is like full of all these different cities and the cities have little spaces on them that you can put little pieces. And in between all these cities, there are all these roads, and all the roads have other spaces that you can put pieces on. And basically, what you're doing is you're basically putting pieces on the map, and you're kind of trying to take over these little roads. And when you have enough pieces on the roads, pretty much when you have taken up every spot on the road, you can then kind of quote unquote claim the route. And then when you claim the route, a variety of things could happen. You then earn the right to put a piece into one of those cities that I was talking about that's adjacent. You could do that. Some cities actually, you can instead of putting a piece in the city, you can decide to power up your board, because this is kind of like the OG take things off of your player mat to unlock power games, right? I don't
Sort
know
of
if there
like
was
Gaia Project or Terra Mystica, right?
yeah, Terra Mystica, Barrage. I don't know if there were games like this before Hansa Teutonica, but I think a lot of people point to Hansa Teutonica as being like at least the probably the first major game that had this thing. So really the game is about claiming routes, getting presence in these cities, and powering up your board. It's it's so easy to learn. It's so easy to teach, and it's so easy to set up. And yet the strategy, it really has so many layers. This is a game that in the past I've always said this is a like a like a log cabin game or something, where if you were going off to a cabin, for the weekend with friends, like you bring this game. This is the sort of game, if you were to only bring one game, you could bring this game and probably play it all weekend long, and and you would have a great time. It's just a remarkable game.
Ben, is this an abstract?
Um, it could be an abstract. It has abstract qualities. One of the things that has one of the Hansa Teutonica is famous for just having like the driest box art of all time, which is now different because we have the big box. There's just this board that's just like you just look at it and you just see roads. You see roads, you see cities. It's about as dry as can be, that it really borders on abstract. I don't think it's an abstract though. I don't, because I think this is, um, well, I mean, all games are abstract at their core, right?
Yeah, I mean, but this is literally putting cubes out in order to control
Yes,
spaces with other cubes and removing cubes from your board that
you
give
don't.
you.
Yeah, you don't feel like you're tradesmen and sales or merchants going around,
Yeah,
the Hanseatic League doing things.
right. And just the fact that it's just a box full of cubes and a map also it feels very almost like you're playing like a Moncala game or something, like where it's just like it's uh very simplistic. It's just a board and a handful of different colored cubes.
Yeah,
um Now,
but
I
I
yeah, go
was
ahead.
I was gonna say that for many years I've actually always said that if this game were rethemed into um, outer space, and instead of having tradesmen and and merchants, because by the way, those pieces I was talking about, they're either cubes or they're discs, and one are tradesmen, one are merchants. If we it's because obviously, but if this were rethemed and it was outer space, and instead of cities these were planets, and instead of merchants and traders we had like little spaceships and like Death Stars or
Mhm.
whatever, and especially if you had this as miniatures or even little miniatures, I guarantee this game would be one of the hottest games on BGG.
It's so funny that I wrote that exact down. I wrote down before in my notes, if this had a sci-fi fantasy theme, it would be in every Ameritrash Gamers collection.
Every single one. It would be
Every
probably
single one.
top 20.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not. I actually think it would be a really good thing. The designer himself, there's a thread on BGG where he's said he's been open to retheming it, and then I think he actually has settled on some sort of Chicago mob theme, which is cool. I think space is the way to go, because everyone was like, space has been overdone. I'm like, it has been, and I'm not like Mr. Everything has to be in outer space, but I think this one actually really would be wonderful as like a space themed game.
Yeah, conquering, hyperspace lanes and stuff. Um So it's almost funny, but the mechanics of this game somehow feel thematic to me,
Hmm.
of not of in a specific theme, but like this game, and you feel that it, that it's sort of the father of or mother of Gaia Project and Terra Mystica. And that board you have in front of you, that player board, that has all these juicy asymmetrical powers just waiting for you to pluck from the vine and bring to life. The game becomes so quickly a game of asymmetry. Like we all start with exactly the same stuff. We start with exactly the same powers. We have two actions, which feels so small. Your turns are. Jennifer talked about this being, what a micro turn game that she loves, and this is one of her favorite games. And your turns, especially at the beginning of the game, are so fast. They are. You just put two cubes down, maybe, or displace one cube, and swap another around, and that's your turn. But then, one person upgrades their ability to recycle cubes faster. One person ups their ability to move more cubes. One person, or eventually, most people end up adding more actions to their turn from the acciones space, which is always fun to
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
The games, or one person upgrades their privileges, which allows them to put cubes in different places than other people can at the beginning of the game. And so quickly it becomes a wildly asymmetrical game where every single person at the table, after just a couple rounds, feels like they have totally different powers than everybody else, and they all feel super strong. And you're like,
Yeah, that's a
oh,
great.
I would kill to have the bag power that person has right now. Or, oh my God, if I just had the actions that person have, I'd be crushing right now. And then that person with all the actions is going, I can only place my cubes in white spots on the board right now. I would kill to be able to put a cube in an orange spot like that player over there. And that somehow feels so thematic, that feeling of that power it gives you, that like and that's something that I know Ameritrash gamers look for so much, is that wish fulfillment of becoming powerful and feeling like you can do something no one else at the table. And it almost has like a war game quality, like when you put that cube down, to block somebody else or put a space down, that has the aggression of an old school war game, not a cube pusher.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point, because I think by developing those special powers, it somehow immerses you in a way that takes it away from being abstract. Suddenly, these cubes and circles kind of have some heft to them. The circles do, especially this, because the circles, the one thing that is a real signature of this game is that you can put your piece down on one of these roads, and then someone, as one of their actions, can knock your piece off the road. But in order to knock the piece off the road, you got to kill one of the pieces that's in your supply, because you have some of your trades and tradesmen and merchants you have available to you, and then some are in the quote unquote graveyard. They're in this like larger stock that you
Stock,
have
yeah.
no access to. So you can bump someone out, but you have to kill a piece. And then on top of that, not only when you bump someone out, they're not off the board. They just move to an adjacent route. And on top of that, they get to take someone from directly from their graveyard and put it on the board. So this
As a 4 cube swing.
yeah, and when you displace a merchant, which are the discs, you actually have to kill two of your pieces, and then they get two pieces. So the merchants, when they come out, it's like, oh, the merchant,
Yeah.
you know, and they, I feel like they gain a personality in a way that these pieces gain personalities in ways that maybe other abstracts don't.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like that mechanic to me is a defining mechanic of this game, that displacement thing, because it makes so many interesting choices, because it is better to block somebody else 9 out of 10 times than it is to create your own line,
Yes.
because you're going to be getting more cubes for free. And even if you don't want those cubes to end up on adjacent routes to the ones that were kicked out, you have actions that allow you to pick them up and move them anywhere, which you're basically just creating more cubes for yourself by blocking people. And so it creates so much interaction. Just that rule itself forces everyone together.
Yes.
Nobody does well if everybody just sort of plays their own solitaire game, as we learned in one of our games. Like you cannot win this game, and you cannot stop the winner of this game
Yeah.
unless you are constantly getting in each other's ways, which really gives it a war game feel at a certain point.
But you know what's great about it is that I actually, generally speaking, I don't like area control. I hate a game where really like what I'm doing is a bunch of actions to get a bunch of cubes in a region, and then someone comes along and just like kicks them off. Like they get kicked off or moved away, and then I got to do it all over again. To me, that's like very uninteresting and unpleasant. But if there's area control with other mechanics involved, I'm down for it. And what's great about this one here is that here you are putting a lot of effort to get these cubes on the board in places that you want. But when someone kicks you off of a route, it's a positive experience, right? Because you are gaining something from it that's actually more valuable
When
often.
and 90% of the time, you put that cube there so that would happen.
Yes.
That
So when
was your
someone
goal.
exactly, it was your goal. So when someone kicks you out, your goal has been fulfilled, and that's like a really fun thing. And then there's also a lot because of that mechanic. There's a huge element of this game where you are getting into people's heads. You're like, where are they going? What do they want to do? I need to, because sometimes they haven't even put anything in a route yet, but you got to say they're probably going to go for that route on the next turn. So let me put my piece here just because I think that's where they're going to go. You
Oh
know?
yeah, and where people's cubes at on the board are never where they want them to be. They're there to confuse you. Like what they have one cube up here, one cube down there, one cube up here, and one cube over here, but they have the ability to move 4 cubes into one space. So on their next action, they're going to pick up all those cubes and drop them into one place. Where are they going? You know,
Yeah.
where in that, and that's such a fun game because I mean, if you call your shot and you put 3 cubes in one lane, you're guaranteeing someone's going to put their 4th cube there,
Yeah.
in order to block you. Like there's no chance they won't because they'd be silly not to. You're giving them free cubes.
But
So you
yeah.
can never do that. But you're also giving up
Uh,
the option. What if somebody else decides to put 3 cubes there on their turn? You're going to displace 3 of them if you really need to go there?
but there's this great mechanic, as you've been alluding to. There's a great mechanic casually known as the book action. And that's the one that allows you to move a certain number of cubes from anywhere on the board to anywhere else on the board. And in the beginning, it starts off that you can move, I think, 2 cubes, and then you can upgrade it to 3, then 4, then 5.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, actually, sometimes it can be an overlooked action because what happens is I could put 3 cubes on a four spot uh, route. I could put 3 cubes, and you're like, haha, I'm going to stop Ben, and you're going to put your cube on that 4th spot to stop me. And I had no intention ever of claiming that route. I
Right.
just did it there to draw your cube over there. And then on my
Yep.
next turn, I gather all my cubes and go to the place that you left completely open because I acted like I had no interest in it. And so that book action is really good at doing these hilarious bluffs. Like the fact that this game that looks so dry can have these high moments of comedy where you're just like, all of a sudden I'm gathering all these people. I'm on the path to claim my 4th action. I would never abandon that, right? And then like, zoop, I go somewhere else, and you're like, what? Like you just did something. That's great. That's a great quality.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Also, is like obviously acciones, which is the action that gives you more actions,
Hmm.
or the ability that gives you more actions, is very powerful. But what's so wonderful about this game is that every action feels so powerful. Like, I mean, just having that ability to move more on a turn is huge. Or the bag action, as we call it, which is where you move as one action, you move a certain amount of cubes from your stock to your supply, so you can start using them. At the
Hmm.
beginning of the game, you can only move 3, and if you only get 2 actions, one of your actions is to move 3, and then you get to place 1. That feels horrible.
Hmm.
But if you upgrade it just once, now you can move 5, which means you're not going to have to do that action for 3 or 4 more turns, which becomes so huge compared to everybody else at the table. And then if you get that up to 7, and then the 4th one is the letter C for some inexplainable reason, which just means get all of your cubes in your stock, move all your cubes from stock to supply, which is just like, then you don't have to do that again for maybe the rest of the game. I mean, it's like it becomes each one is just so it has that Marco Polo thing of like, okay, everybody at this table is broken.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everybody can do too much.
And all these things that you can upgrade, they all open up interesting strategies, right? Because if you go really strong with the bag action, so that way you can just like refill really quickly, then you're probably someone who doesn't really care if you're going to just it'll just kick people out of routes because you have so many things so many pieces that you can always access. That your thing is, I'm going to go wherever I want and I'm just going to kick people out. I don't care, right? If you go to the book action, what's interesting with the book action, if you upgrade your book action, that's the only way to get more of the merchants, which again are the round ones, which require kicking people out, more people to kick out. And what's interesting is that those round circles, as opposed to those square circles, but those those circles, if people displace you, you're going to get more cubes onto the board. And then the more cubes you have onto the board, the more effective you can be at doing that book action and sort of sending them all around the board. So that like works really well. And then you have the privilege, where as you upgrade the privilege and you have access to these like these spots that other people don't have access to, that could give you a lot of control over cities. And then there's this one area called the Colleen table, where you can
Colin, yeah, right.
Colleen, the Colleen table. It's where Colleen lives. You go visit Colleen, but you can actually, when you claim that route, you can actually kind of retire one of your valuable merchant discs there, and get some really chunky endgame points. And if you are really high with your privilege, you can get more and more points there. So all these things kind of have like really big strategic implications. And part of the game is sort of deciding what route you're going to go down, and that is often like 99% of the time impacted by what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and every turn you have these absurdly interesting decisions. I mean, even just the action that maybe the most important action of the game outside of the displacing action is when you complete a trade route. And you often have many choices. And one of those basic choices is to put one of your cubes in one end of that trade route and sort of quote unquote conquer it, or at least begin to conquer it, or potentially hold it for a short period of time. But you get a cube in there, and whoever has the most cubes actually controls it. But what's the point of control is two things. One is, for the rest of the game, as long as you control it, you get 1 point if you control one end of that trade route every time somebody completes that trade route. So if you put that next to the acciones action, so I have to complete this trade route in order to upgrade my actions. But if I control one end of that line, I get a point. If I control both ends of that line, I get 2 points every time you do it. One of the game ending triggers of the game is first to 20 points. So if 10 people, or if 10 times somebody goes there and you control two ends, you ended the game and they helped you do it. And you probably won because of that. So just that decision of, okay, I'm the first one to enter acciones. Do I take my third action, or do I put my cube down here right now because everyone is going to be going here? I could get 10 points out of this, no problem.
Right. And
that's a crazy exciting decision.
It really is. And then probably the best part about that is how it affects the entire game. Things like that affect an entire game. And this comes back to what we were saying before about how it's just every time you set it up, it's just a map. The only variability in the setup are that there's these little bonus tokens, which I think we'll get to in a little bit, but I don't want to get into it right now. But there are these bonus tokens. It's always the same 3 that are out there on the board, and they just might be in
one-time powers.
One-time powers. But the game always has the same setup. But it's a wildly, wildly dynamic game for reasons such as this. In Matt's example, someone puts down an office on both sides of that very valuable acciones route, which means that every time someone claims the acciones route, that person gets 2 points. So what happens if everyone says, well, we don't want to give that person 2 points, so we're going to do something else? And then suddenly we have a situation where we're playing a game where people are saying, screw that person. We're all going to be fine with either 2 or 3 acciones. And now people are focusing in different areas completely. And that's what happens. You do
until one person goes, well, but if I had 3 actions, I'd destroy all these people. And then that person goes, well, if he has 3 actions, I have to have 3 actions.
Well, then what happens is someone puts their merchant in there and they're like, fine, if you want to do that, you have to give me some pieces, right? Like,
exactly.
So every single thing that happens on this board has a hugely dynamic impact on how the board develops, what routes are valuable. And that's why, even though it has a static starting state, it always goes in a totally different direction, which is, I
Yeah.
think, amazing.
Well, and it does that thing also that like Marco Polo does, that like if somebody dominates with a strategy, then that affects the meta. So you may have one game where somebody just goes big in privilege and is just like dominating the board, and then everybody goes like, "Well, man, that's how we win." And so people try that the next game, and then it just keeps evolving the meta. And so I think this is such a, and the fact that it plays in 90 minutes, like you could easily play this twice in a night, and I think often you would, because it's quite addictive. It has that like one more turn kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is also a game where you really have to like zig where people are zagging, and I think that's like it's really key because in the beginning, there's almost always a rush for the excuse me, the Accione spot because everyone wants to get to that third action. It's really important to get that third action. There are people on BGG who say you can win with just having two acciones, and I totally, totally believe that. But I think you have to be playing like a really like high level game, really like full
Yeah.
facility of like really seeing the matrix. I think you at least have to have three. I don't. You can get away with just three and not four, and
Sure.
you honestly don't even need five. But if you because the thing is this, you'd think, oh, five actions is so valuable because five is the top. But while you're upgrading to five, everyone's doing a lot of other important things. They're probably laying the groundwork for some really big endgame points. So, but the point is that if everyone is rushing to the acciones and that is getting clogged up,
Yeah.
like you have to say to yourself, where else can I go? Because you can start building something else entirely, and
Go
then
get a
when
bonus token that gives you 4 more actions
yeah,
while everyone's
build your
doing.
bag. Build your bag, or because
Yeah,
the other thing is if you or go to the book action, because a lot of times I find that people go to acciones first, and then bag is often the other hot commodity.
right.
And I
But
think the
privilege.
privilege is good too, but I think the book action is
Yeah.
really great.
Well,
And
because that's the being able to plop that merchant down is just gonna, like, spawn so many new cubes for you.
right. And then the thing is this, once you have a bunch of merchants, then there's a whole other set of decisions that opens up because one thing we haven't really talked about is endgame scoring. And uh we talked about if you can go visit Colleen and you can retire a merchant there to get some big points. But there are two other well there are a few others, but there's two other things I want to talk about right here. Endgame conditions, which is you'll get 2 points for every city that you can control, and you'll
Right, which
also
means most cubes or ties broken by farthest to the right, which means last in.
yes. And then the other thing is you look at your largest network of cities, whether you control them or not, and you look at the number of pieces you have in those cities. So, across 3 cities, maybe you have like 5 pieces because you filled up a bunch of offices. Um, and you're going to take that number of pieces and you're going to multiply it by what's called I guess, your key value, because there's another track on your board that's keys.
Right, that has
And
no in-game purpose. Helps you every time you upgrade it, you're not helping yourself at all in the game, but you
no.
could be potentially winning the entire game at the end because your multiplier is going up so high.
Yeah, because the key track, if memory serves me correctly, everyone starts with one, and then the next level is two, then I think it goes three, maybe 3 4 5 or 3 3 4. But the point is this: if you have a network with 5 pieces in it, and you unlock your key value up to three, you're getting 5 times 3, and you're getting 15 points.
Yeah.
So why was I talking about this now? Oh, so the merchants. So getting back to why merchants are important, because there are a bunch of if you're deciding you want to make a really big network, then there are certain cities or certain offices where only your merchant can go into it. So if you're using your merchant there to get like a really good network for your endgame score, that means it's one less merchant you have to send over to Colleen, and it's one less merchant you have to get in people's ways. So there's actually like a huge amount of decisions to make with merchant management.
Yep. And if that weren't enough, your longest route is super important at the end of the game. But in the game, there's an east west connection, depending on the map, between two cities. And the first person to create a contiguous line between those two cities will get some in game points, which could be quite a lot. And that's one of the end game triggers is the first person to hit 20 points. The game instantly ends at the end of their action. You don't finish a round and all
Yeah.
this Euro stuff. It's just, nope, done. Game end, score it up. So often the first to 20 can be quite important unless somebody has been, as we just said, going heavy on those keys.
Well, and that's the thing. That's another zigzag moment, because if someone has set up a bunch of those like those offices on highly trafficked trade routes, and they're just getting 2 points after 2 points, and you see them going up,
Yeah.
you can try to race them, which is totally viable. But usually, what I do is I say, okay, they're gonna try to accelerate this and make this a short game. I'm gonna try to like bolster up my network and get those keys going, because then I'm gonna be able to like, that's how I'm gonna counter this.
Right.
Or you could just say to yourself, they're making this a short game. I don't have time to do the keys, so I'm not gonna worry about that. Let me try to get points in other ways. Because another way to get points is every time you fully upgrade one of your tracks from your boards, that's 4 points at the end of the game, except for the key track. So there's points there. There's points, as you said, connecting those two cities from far flung. There's the Colleen table. So you kind of have to like gauge what sort of endgame points do I realistically think I can go for, given the pace at which this is going, or how can I slow down this person trying to accelerate the game? How do I slow them down? Maybe I'll take my merchants and plop them into those spots, or the table as a whole is like, we're not going to let them accelerate. Again,
Right.
more examples of dynamic gameplay that evolves.
Yeah, and you get in that really fun position where that person who was racing to 20 all of a sudden realizes they're not going to win
Yeah.
if it gets to 20, and then another player starts giving them points on purpose in order to end the
Yes.
game, and they regret their entire decision of putting their score at 15 because now they have one round left to figure out how to win because they created an endgame condition that is no longer useful to them.
And it happens a lot, by the way. It happens a lot, usually with new players, where they just like race to that 20, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, honey,
Somebody
you
points
gotta,
out, you
you
lost
gotta,
if you end this game.
you gotta make sure you got something for afterwards. Didn't we learn anything from the elections? So, but let's talk about the bonus.
Those ballot dumps were a big problem, though.
Let's talk about the bonus tokens, though, also, because the bonus tokens are a really important part of the game that I think also get a little bit overlooked. We mentioned before, there are these little circles, and when you claim a route, if there's a bonus token on the route, you get to claim that token, and it gives you a
In
power
addition to whatever you were going to do on that route.
in addition. And so, those tokens, there's a little bit of set collection. Like if you have if you have like one at the end of the game, you get 1 point. If you have 2 to 3, you get like 3 points. If you
have
4
10
to 5,
or more, you can get 21 points.
yeah. And so while people are futzing around fighting over acciones, you might just quietly go over the corner and just like claim some bonus markers. And sometimes those bonus markers will sort of like make up for the fact that you don't have as many acciones.
Yeah, like that 4 action one is highly contested. I mean, and that having an extra 4 actions in addition to whatever actions you have in one turn once totally could make up the difference between those people who just spent 4 rounds fighting over 1 extra action per turn.
Yeah, and there's a bonus that allows you to just upgrade one of your tracks, just like that. And also, by the way, we should also mention, every time you upgrade your tracks, you are bringing more pieces into your supply. So it's actually, you're growing your inventory. But those, something you can do, and some people actually think it's a really strong strategy, is, and it's something that I did in our recent play, which is you set up offices on 2 different cities on both ends of a route, and then you put a bonus marker there, because every time you claim a bonus marker at the end of your turn, you got to put a new one out on the board. So you just put it on the same route that your office is in, and you just claim it, and you're just like, oh, I'm getting a bonus marker and I'm getting 2 points. And people don't pay
Nobody
attention.
wants to give you those 2 points.
No one wants to get the 2 points, but like, it's like, if people start doing that to you, you got to jump in there and make
Take
sure
back
that
control of one of those offices. Yeah.
one of the offices, or make sure that like it's hard for them to claim that bonus marker, because it's a lot of powers, it's a lot of points in game, and a lot of points at the end of the game. It's a totally strong strategy that I think gets overlooked when people are rushing for acciones and bag actions and things like that.
So to me, this was a game that I remember existing when I first got into this hobby in about 2010, which is a year after this game came out. It was still a hot new game. I remember people playing, and I didn't even give this thing a second look. It looked so dry and I just sort of the vibe around it was that it was heavy and dry and just the quintessential cube pushing
Yep.
soulless Euro. And it's always had that sort of description. I remember playing it back then and being like, it's fine, it's fine. But I feel like my initial judging a book by its cover attitude totally tainted my one play of it, 8, 9, whatever years ago. And when I came back to it this year, when I relearned it and played it again, I fell wildly in love with it and was like, wow, did I really judge this game incorrectly? I mean, honestly, I'm going to sum up my thoughts here. This is a game that should be in every Ameritrash Gamers collection and every Euro Gamers collection.
Collection essential.
To me, this is a cornerstone game. This is a game that you can teach anyone in 15 minutes. Like, it's not a complicated game. The end game scoring can get a little. There's just a lot of things like the longest route and the keys and that. But just the basics. You do 5 things on your turn, and most of them are just putting a cube down or moving a cube. Mm-hmm. Literally, you could teach this to a non-gamer, and I think it has so many eureka moments of like, it has so many wow moments during the teach. And honestly, like like this kind of art doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I think it's beautiful, and I love this artist's work. I think Dennis Lohausen's stuff is gorgeous, and it's like this looks to me like a Middle Earth map, so it does actually feel very thematic to me. But like, if this looks dry to you, just give yourself a little talk, convince yourself it isn't, because it isn't. And like, this is a highly thematic, so fun, simple, decision rich, just like this is a Euro that feels like it could have been made this year. There's nothing old and stodgy and old school about this game. If this game came out this year, this would be my game of the year.
Wow. Yeah, it is a fantastic game. I will say this about the art too, is that the player boards are adorable. They're like these little desks, and they look like they look like 3D desks, and there's a player aid on the front of the desk, which is really cute. I love those little desks. It's a fantastic game, and I will say also that the big box includes 2 other maps. One of the maps I've never played, the East map, but the Britannia map I've played twice now. We just played it this week.
Yep.
And I think it's worth talking about that map because I think it's actually
double-sided maps for different player counts, which is really fun.
Oh yeah, that's actually another thing, which is that at 3 and 5 players, the game is very cutthroat because at 3 players, there's a map where there's like only one route to Acciones and one route to the privileges action.
Yeah, and it's a war.
It's a war. And then when you turn it over on the 4 and 5 player side, there's like 2 routes. So it's a little easier to get into Acciones and privilege. So with 4 players, there's a little bit, it's actually a little less cutthroat. And then in 5, it tightens up again.
Yeah. And there I think this is a 3 and 5 player game to me, it feels like. I mean, I would definitely not turn down a 4 player game. It's different, but I think this game probably sings at 3 and 5.
I think it depends on what type of singing you want to do, because some people may actually prefer it at 4 with like a little
looser room.
Yeah. I think it's always, you're still going to have the same like visceral experiences and fun. 5 players, it gets really crazy. I mean, it is important to talk about player count in this too. Is that we had a game we did play the Britannia map, and you and Paul went at it. You guys were like just like
we had never played it before, and we were exploring the space and we explored
with each other
all the wrong directions.
Yeah. So you guys were just like getting in each other's way like incessantly, and I just was left to do my own thing. And so I just was like, I'll do this and I'll do this. I didn't get bumped the entire game. I felt like one of those people who gets the finale in Survivor who never was nominated. Like
it's always under the radar.
His name was never written down. So I think with 5 players, that's less likely to happen because there's so many people that like someone's always going to get in your way. Someone's always going to have your number, But I think it's great at 3, 4, and 5, honestly.
Let's talk briefly about those other 2 maps, because they're not just aesthetic changes or route building changes. They're pretty meaty changes to the game, and they get heavier. They're kind of leveled up. I mean, like the base game is pretty simple. That's where I definitely start if you never played this game or if I was teaching to new players. Then you get the Eastern Hanseatic League, which adds one or two new rules to it that severely change the game. And then you get Britannia, which adds a whole bunch of new rules to it. That does to me make it a 3.50 game.
Yeah.
And really interesting. This is like, one of those Age of Steam maps that's like a new game. Like these really mix it up. This is not a Concordia map, which is like something a little different to try a different player against. Like these are pretty cool. Like, and I really like the Britannia map.
Yeah, I think the Britannia map is excellent, and it was really fun to play it again because I had played it like 2 years ago, and I was like, this was so fun. But I don't think I'd played Hansa since then with people that like it was always people that like we should do the base map.
Right. Sure.
And Britannia, what's really cool is um, the main cool thing there is that it's in Great Britain, and
There's
it's
three
like
different
England,
countries.
right? You got England, Wales, and Scotland. And in the 3-player map, it's just England and Wales that you're concerned
Right.
with. And you can't place things in Wales unless you control the rightmost spot in either London or Cardiff.
Right.
So,
And
that's
even then, you're limited to only one cube in Wales per turn.
yes. But if you have London and Cardiff, you can put 2 down in a turn. And the reason why that's significant is twofold. One, there is an end game score where it's like whoever controls the most cities in Wales, or and then also in Scotland, if you're playing with Scotland, will get a certain number of points. But also, and this is a great, great change, is that the Acciones thing, which we've talked about, is like one of the most sought after, if not the most sought after special power you can improve. So that kind of like resides on the border of Wales and England. And if you want to, from the England side, if you want to like upgrade your Acciones, the route is four spots long. You've got to put 4 pieces on before you can claim that route. But on the Wales side, it's 3 pieces. So
So evil.
so in some ways it's easier to claim it from the Wales side,
Except you can
but
only put one cube per turn there.
and you have to go through a whole bunch of rigmarole to get in there. But then again, chances are you might not have as much competition because, it's like a whole thing to get into Wales.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's kind of a perfect, perfect way to make it to adjust, to tweak that Acciones thing. So that way it's not like, oh, well, they got onto Acciones first and they got to power up first and they have some sort of advantage. It's like, you really got to do it. Second of all, if I may continue my monologue, the key power in Britannia the root is only 3 pieces instead of 4, which is good because that way you can really attack those keys. Because we didn't mention this, but usually once one person starts going to improve their key power, then everyone descends on it. And it's a disaster. And so this sort of like opens up keys a little bit to make that more of a viable thing. There are also bonus tokens that are built into the board that, they're printed on the board. And so when you claim that route, you get that power immediately. And one of those is to place 2 pieces inside of Wales. So that's another way you can get into Wales.
But those are called maritime trade routes, and they usually need 1 or 2 of your circles.
Yes.
Which is very costly.
And that also adds another wrinkle. So like if you retire your merchants in the Britannia version of the Colleen table, if you retire them there, then that's 1 fewer circle you can use for these bonus things, which are really important.
Permanently docking your boats.
Yeah. So and I think there are a few other things, I think, but those are the main ones, and it just sings. It's so good.
Great. I'm more excited to play the Britannia map more than I am the base map. But I the base map is still. I just think this big box is fantastic, having these 3 different maps. And the coolest thing in the Eastern Hanseatic map we didn't talk about is that there are major cities in the game that hold an unlimited amount of squares, basically like offices, but it's hard to get a square in there. But once you get a square in there, there's no limit to the amount. So like you could really go to war trying to conquer certain towns there, and it never will fill up.
Yeah, and there's this one, like the Acciones and the bag action, which we talked about are the 2 most popular, are paired together in the same city. So when you claim it, you got to choose it. So I would love to try that one because I think Jennifer said, I don't want to misquote Jennifer, but I think that Jennifer said that she likes that one, but I don't want to misquote her. I could be wrong.
Right. Well, we're going a little long here. I have my final thoughts already. So, Ben, do you want to just hit us with your final thoughts on Hansa
It's
Teutonica?
awesome. Buy it. I mean, what else can I say? I mean, I think my final thoughts have been this entire review. I mean, I love it. It's like you said everything. I don't have to add on to it. It's great. It's collection essential.
Yeah,
It's
I
great.
think it
Get
is.
it. If you get it, yeah.
I think it's made itself way into my top 10 of all time this year. I mean, I think
Wow.
it's honestly, it's a game that it's one of those heavy games, and I don't know if I think it's heavy. I think it's medium weight, but it's one of those games that I'm excited to play with non-gamers,
Yeah.
which I would never say about most heavy games. But I feel that way about Concordia too. It's one of those games where it's like, oh, this will show someone my hobby.
Yeah.
But it will still be enjoyable for them and for me. There's very few games I feel that with a non-gamer to be like, here's a modern Euro. This is what I'm always off doing that you know nothing about. Like this one and Concordia. And this one I think is even simpler than Concordia to teach. Simpler for people to wrap their heads around.
It is simpler, but Concordia to me is still the better game ultimately. But that's that's because Concordia is my number one of all time, so it's literally better than every game to me. But Hansa is, I think it's in my top 10. If it's not my top 10, it's definitely my top 20. My top 10 is always in flux, but it is 100% a game. If you find it, you should get it. If you do wind up encountering the original game, it comes in a very svelte box, so it doesn't even take up that much space in your shelf, which is wonderful too. So yeah, I mean, what else can be? Go play it and enjoy watching the game unfold. And we've actually given a lot of strategy tips, and I say just take them and play with it and see what path it takes you down, because it's always going to be a different path.
And play this with your Ameritrash gamers, your thematic gamers, your FFG mini gamers. I swear, if you can just get them to squint their eyes while they look at this map and these cubes and try to see Space Marines or whatever they're into, hobbits, I swear this game will sing for a thematic Ameritrash gamer.
It kills me. It kills me that there is not a version of this with TI4 components.
This would be bigger than Gloomhaven, honestly. If there was elves in it.
Yeah, I actually 100%. And I'm not saying that from a cynical point of view, people fell for it. I'm saying it because it would just add a layer of thematic engagement that for some people is really important, and even people who it's not important, I think they would enjoy it.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.